Hi, you're listening to Teka Teka, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the divorce bill. So, the House passed it in the third and final reading last May, and the ball is now at the court of the Senate. So, I'm Tatiana Maligro, one of Teka Teka's reporters, and I'm being joined today by our CEO, Carl Javier.
Hello.
Hello. So, Carl, I think we should start this conversation talaga by giving siguro a backgrounder for our listeners. So, what's happened so far, and what can we expect? What can the Senate expect with this new absolute divorce bill that's just been transmitted to them?
Right. So I think this has been a really, really long battle now to get divorce moving. I just finished reading an Amanda Montel book, and she actually drops the Philippines as one of these places that divorce is not available for people. And so it is a thing that most modern societies already have. Our Congress has finally passed it, and now the roadblock is the Senate. Tati, you've done the stories about this already. We had a Senate president who said na as long as nakaupo siya dyan, never magkakaroon ng divorce. We are operating within a very conservative society, but there is hope. Supposedly, nagkaroon ng, ay, not supposedly, nagkaroon ng uh, uh, quick poll of what the numbers look like in the Senate. And right now it's 5-5-1. 5 for, 5 against, 1 undecided, and the rest still need to think about it. And those actually kind of look like good numbers if you're just looking at it that way. But then when you think about the pressures and the kinds of conservative backgrounds that a lot of the undecided represent, it looks like it's going to be a challenge. Congress resumes this month, and I think it's important that we keep this conversation going because I think, for the both of us, and I think for a lot of our listeners, this is a very meaningful issue, and I think we don't have to beat around the bush. We believe that divorce is going to be helpful to people. Um, how are you seeing this whole horse race?
Ako kasi, Carl, I think I'm in a unique position, no? Kasi, ako mismo, I'm a child of annulment. So,
Mhm.
my parents began the process when I was, if I'm not mistaken, 6, 7, and
Wow,
it was a 4 year ordeal talaga.
four
And
years.
yeah, 4 years. It took that
Imagine mo
long to
nakipag-break
finally.
ka for 4 years, no?
Exactly, 'di ba? It was super drawn out talaga. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that there are very specific grounds
Okay.
for annulment. For example, fraud, inability to consummate, for example, not non-consent. These are things that have to be proven
Yeah.
before the court, that these are things that happened before my parents or anyone who's getting annulled got married, and so therefore hindi valid yung marriage na yun, and it's null and void. And
And
there's a
I
lot of.
think important to come in here and say if your spouse cheats on you, that's not grounds,
Exactly. It's
right?
only a ground for legal separation, but hindi
Uh,
siya grounds rather for annulment. So that's what makes it really hard, because there are a lot
or
of
physical
talks.
abuse.
Exactly. So there are a lot of discussions among our politicians na parang, oh, maybe I don't want divorce, but siguro gawin na lang nating mas accessible and affordable yung annulment, which I think it's is good and all, because there are these abusive or maybe fraudulent marriages that really do hindi wala talaga siyang visa from the very beginning. But
Mhm.
I feel like it doesn't address the big problem that divorce is trying to hindi lahat ng marriages kasi um hindi sila lahat um null and void to begin with.
Right.
When you
Null
come
and
in.
void on the specific grounds as
Yeah,
of of, of
exactly.
the law, ganun.
Yes, exactly. So these grounds, they're very very specific, and they take a lot of years to prove. Like for example, in terms of my parents, it was a 4 year
Yeah.
it was a 4 year technically lawsuit, kasi there was a
Mm.
case filed before the court. And one of the things that you have to prove is, y- for example, for things like, mental incapacity, you
Mhm.
have to bring in the psychologist or psychiatrist to say that, oh, my soon to be ex spouse is not psychologically incapable to get like psychologically capable to get married. And
Yeah.
I think that that's just very sometimes these things and a lot of these marriages kasi they don't happen. Sometimes these marriages, you come into these marriage with good like intents,
Mhm.
good intents, good plans to build and start a family together, but you realize along the way na this person is not for me. Maybe magkaiba yung gusto namin sa buhay. And I feel like um I feel like simply making annulment accessible, while it's good, it does not acknowledge these realities
Oh, yeah, yeah.
um in a marriage. um
Well,
and it's
kasi
costly.
I got married in my mid 30s. So I waited a
Mm.
long time, and I can safely say that I was for sure psychologically unfit to be married in my 20s. Um, but I can't imagine the process that one needs to go through if you're going to get annulled. Basically, one of you has to say, oh, sige, ako yung psychologically unfit. Sige, magpapatigin ako sa psychologist, and I will be certified as psychologically unfit so that we can pay. And we know, in my research, I think it was like 150 to 300,000
Yeah.
to process the annulment over a course of like you said, possibly 3 to 4 years to get all of this paperwork going. So it's really a lot of friction for a problem. And I think one of the things that we discount maybe is the amount of emotional toil and
Yeah.
burden and distress that would put on the entire family that's going through this. I'm
Yeah.
sure the spouses, obviously, but they're done with this already. If there's children involved, the immediate family involved, like the amount of burden that's there, when there is a much easier option, if we could only
Mhm.
put it on the table, and we're still blocking that. And I think part of the reason why that's being blocked is because of the belief in the sanctity of marriage. And as
Mhm.
someone who is happily married now, I want to believe that, and I believe that everyone who gets married comes, or 80, 90%, most people, you get married, you imagine that this is it, this is the one. You're getting married because you believe that this is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. But we also know, parang ship of Theseus tayo, na every 7 years all of our cells are replaced or whatever, kung gusto natin ng mga ganyang level of metaphor, but we change. Right? And people change, people grow up, and it's possible that you at 25 is totally different from you at 35, from you at 45. And divorce is kind of something that acknowledges that it's possible that you hit a point that that is no longer what works. And that's me being kind about it. Hindi ko pa sinama dyan yung cases of abuse,
Yeah.
cases of infidelity, cases of, like someone who just kind of is just behaving in a manner that the other person didn't know. Isa pang problema sa society natin, we don't allow people to live together. Diba? Parang there's still social stigma. It's much more accepted now for people to live
Yeah.
together, but there's still social stigma. So you only wind up learning about the person when you're living together. And often that happens after they get married. And then you see what the person is actually like. So, ayan, maraming things. But I think you want to reference a paper about the sanctity of marriage.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting kasi the Ateneo Theology Department, they actually did publish a position paper, specifically yung Center for Catholic Theology and Social Justice nila. So as an Ateneo alum, this group, not just theology experts but also canon lawyers as well. And what's really interesting about this is they acknowledge this reality that couples are facing, na parang um yeah, there's no perfect marriage. There will always be those ups and downs, but there are marriages that um are abusive. They're abusive marriages, and they're marriages that in their words mismo say that should not have happened to begin with. And I think there's this common, I think and the common sentiment kasi ng anti-divorce people that I do see like in online and in some circles ko is that um if you're having problems with your marriage, then just talk it through and just fix it. Just fix it. Find ways to fix it. And that's good and all. Communication is key, but
Yeah,
that doesn't
okay
always
sana
work.
yun. Yeah, not necessarily. I've seen physical abuse, and that's 'di ba? You can't talk through that.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's very interesting how this position paper really acknowledges it and even mentions or raises some parang structural inadequacies in
Yeah.
our churches and our parishes, and they say that these parishes sometimes they don't have these safeguards that prevent their followers from who are
Mm,
not maybe prepared or incapable of being able to um get married and be able to have this good marriage.
yeah.
They just don't have these safeguards to prevent them from making these lifelong commitments na parang hindi pa sila handa, or hindi pa sila,
Yeah.
or they're not in the right mind or the right mindset to get married. And so it's very interesting how even theologists themselves, some even canon lawyers themselves, calling for this divorce bill to be finally passed in Congress because of these realities, and these realities of like maybe incompatible marriages and
Yeah.
abusive marriages. These are marriages that are not sacramental, and they would say na in siguro in my own words na parang God wouldn't want his children to be in these difficult situations themselves.
Mm-mm.
So I think that this is a reality that I think tumataas na rin yung acknowledgement for it, the need for it. But are some lawmakers are still hesitant to really back this because of maybe
Yeah.
religious beliefs. And siguro I think this is that wake up call that they need for
Yeah.
them to realize na the religion and while marriage it's a
It is.
lifelong
Yeah.
commitment for these
It's a
for the
sacrament.
church.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sacrament, but
Yeah.
you know these situations are not what the church would have wanted for these couples as well.
I kind of love how compassionate this paper is to the plight of people, and we'll put a link to it in the show description. No? But I think one last piece I think we should end on is the difference between annulment and divorce. Um, Obviously, there's a lot, but there's one I want to focus on, and it's the fact that when you have an annulment, it's as if it didn't happen, like
Yeah.
literally null, null and void, as if you were never married,
Yeah.
as opposed to a divorce, which acknowledges the existence of the marriage
Yeah.
and the end of the marriage, which gives you a new chapter. And I'm wondering, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean, say, for you? Like, if you are the daughter of people who were annulled, how does that change your framework of the relationship that your parents had, or the marriage that never happened?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting kasi my mom would tell me this. She told me this when I was like high school siguro na parang, when you were 6, you were 7, I filed for annulment because you told me, Mama, my classmates at school, they tell me that their parents are always fighting. And I told her na, well, I don't want to live like that. And so, I
Wow.
guess that kind of because the kids kahit nakatulog na sila, nasa
Hmm.
kwarto sila, they're aware of um these things that happen
Oo naman.
within their parents. And so I guess for me it's the reason why I want divorce to finally happen um in the Philippines is because my parents had that way, they were able to have that way out through annulment, but it was costly, it was long, unnecessarily long. And I feel like there was just a lot of mental gymnastics that needed to happen
Yeah.
for that annulment to be granted. I mean, imagine like you being in a relationship and for
Hmm.
parang you have to explain to people who have never met you before kung bakit kailangan mo makipag-break sa partner mo.
Mhm.
Um, it's a very personal process, and I feel that with divorce, it not only acknowledges that the marriage did happen, like you mentioned, Carl, but also the end of the day, it gives these families the new start, not
Yeah.
exactly a blank slate, but the new start that they need in order to be able to just live their lives happily. And I think for me that was what my parents went through. Now they're my dad, he's happily with his he's living happily with his partner. My mom, she's still single, but she's still living her own life despite being a single mom, living good happy life. And that's something that I'm happy that I grew up to see my parents have, being able to seek that happiness for themselves despite um what happened between them. And I just really hope that a lot more families and a lot more couples in this country have that opportunity as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to go through that difficult situation, but I'm glad that everyone's kind of had a happy ending now. And I hope that, through divorce, we can make a happy ending much, much more accessible to more people.
Yeah. And don't be sorry, Carl, kasi I don't think of it as something na it's sad. I don't think of it as something sad. I think of it as something that was, yeah, really necessary, really, to move forward. So that's basically our discussion for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Teka Teka. I also want to thank Carl for having this conversation with me. So if you found this insightful, maybe you have friends who maybe you want to share this episode with, if they want to know kung bakit bringing divorce to the Philippines is not exactly a bad thing. So it would mean so much to us if you did share it with them. So this episode was hosted by me, Tatiana Maligro, and it was edited by Pidoy Blanco, and with support from our executive producer, Jel Caro. So make sure you follow Teka Teka on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts, and so that you can continue to get slow news that matters to you.